The woman on the auction block swayed like a willow in a storm. Her face flushed crimson with fever, and Nathan Vance knew before anyone else spoke a word that something was terribly wrong with this entire situation. It was July 1878 in Shafter, Texas, a silver mining town that had sprung up in the desert hills like a mushroom after rain, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the crowd gathered in the town square. Nathan had ridden in from his ranch 15 miles north to purchase supplies, not expecting to find a human being standing where cattle usually stood. The woman wore a threadbare calico dress that had once been blue but now looked like faded sky, and her auburn hair hung loose around her shoulders, damp with perspiration that had nothing to do with the heat. What in God's name is happening here? Nathan pushed through the crowd, his tall frame cutting through the gathered men like a knife through butter. The auctioneer, a weasel-faced man named Silas Grout, grinned with tobacco-stained teeth. Indentured servant contract, Vance. All legal and proper. This here's Rebecca Taylor, fresh from Boston. She owes passage money and needs an employer to work off her debt. Nathan's jaw clenched. He had seen many things in his 32 years, fought in the war between the states, built a ranch from nothing, and buried a brother in these unforgiving hills. But the sight of a sick woman being sold like livestock made his blood boil. She can barely stand upright. That ain't my concern once the gavel falls, Silas said, raising his hammer. Do I hear $50? She needs a doctor, not an employer, Nathan said, watching as Rebecca's knees buckled slightly. She caught herself on the wooden post beside her, and her gray eyes met his for just a moment. They were clouded with fever but held a desperate intelligence that spoke of education and refinement. This was no common laborer. $50, called out a voice from the back. Nathan turned to see Garrett Monroe, owner of the Silver Queen Saloon, leering at Rebecca with an expression that made Nathan's fists clench. Monroe ran girls in the back rooms of his establishment, and everyone knew it. 60, Nathan heard himself say, though he had not planned to bid at all. 70, Monroe countered immediately. Rebecca swayed again, and this time she would have fallen if Silas had not grabbed her arm roughly. Stay upright, girl. You're damaging your own value. $100, Nathan said firmly, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd like a church bell. It was more than he had planned to spend this month, more than any indentured contract should cost, but he could not let Monroe take her. The crowd fell silent. Monroe's face darkened, but he knew when he was beaten. Nathan Vance owned the largest cattle ranch in the territory, and everyone knew he could outbid anyone in Shafter if he chose to. Sold to Nathan Vance. Silas brought the gavel down with a crack that made Rebecca flinch. Nathan strode forward and caught Rebecca just as her legs finally gave out completely. She was burning up, her skin hot enough to warm his hands through her dress. When did she take ill? He demanded. Silas shrugged, counting the money Nathan shoved at him. Was fine this morning, I reckon. Here's her papers. He handed over a sheaf of documents without looking up from the bills. Nathan barely glanced at them before folding them into his pocket. Rebecca was unconscious now, her head lolling against his shoulder as he lifted her easily into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, clearly had not been eating properly. Someone get Doc Morrison, he called out. Doc's in Marfa, won't be back till Thursday, someone replied. Nathan cursed under his breath. Thursday was 4 days away. He looked down at the woman in his arms, at the rapid flutter of her pulse in her throat, at the flush spreading down her neck. Whatever fever had taken her was serious, and she needed help immediately. I'll take her to Maria, he decided, turning toward where his horse waited at the hitching post. His housekeeper had raised 7 children, and nursed more illnesses than most doctors had seen. If anyone could break a fever, it was Maria Sanchez. The ride back to the ranch was the longest 15 miles Nathan had ever traveled. He held Rebecca carefully in front of him on his big bay gelding, supporting her with one arm while guiding the horse with the other. She mumbled incoherently against his chest, burning words in a voice like smoke about Boston and ships and someone named Catherine. Her fever was climbing higher, and by the time the ranch buildings came into view against the dusty horizon, Nathan was genuinely afraid she might die before he could get help. Maria came running when she heard the horse, wiping her hands on her apron, her round brown face creased with concern. "Dios mío, Nathan, what have you brought home?" "Fever," he said shortly, dismounting carefully and carrying Rebecca toward the house. "Bad one. Can you help her?" Maria clucked her tongue, already moving ahead to open the door. "Bring her to the spare room. I will need cold water, many cloths, and you will tell me how you came to have this woman." The spare room was at the back of the house, small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt Maria had made years ago. Nathan laid Rebecca down gently, and Maria immediately began unlacing the woman's boots. "Out, Nathan. I must undress her and get her into a clean nightgown. Go fetch the water I asked for." Nathan obeyed, grateful for something to do with his hands. By the time he returned with a bucket of cool water from the well and an armful of clean cloths, Maria had Rebecca dressed in one of his old shirts, which hung on her slight frame like a tent. The woman looked even more fragile against the white sheets, her hair spread out like a copper fan. "What is her name?" Maria asked, dipping a cloth in the water and placing it on Rebecca's forehead. "Rebecca Taylor. She is from Boston, came west under an indentured contract," Nathan explained, feeling foolish now for his impulsive purchase. "Sela's grout was auctioning her in town, and she was already sick. I could not let Monroe buy her." Maria's face darkened at the mention of Monroe. "You did right. That man is a snake." She changed the cloth, her movements efficient and practiced. "But you know what people will say about you bringing a woman here." "Let them talk," Nathan said roughly. "She needed help." "Your heart is good, Mijo, but your head could use some work," Maria said, not unkindly. "You bought her contract, yes, so she belongs to you now." The words made Nathan uncomfortable. "The law says she is obligated to work for me, but I will not hold anyone against their will. Once she is well, she can decide what she wants to do." Maria smiled slightly. "We shall see. Now go, let me work. This fever must break, or nothing else will matter." Nathan retreated to the porch, pacing restlessly as the sun sank toward the horizon. His ranch hands, 3 good men who had worked for him for years, returned from checking the herds and stared curiously at the unfamiliar horse in the barn. "Boss," called out Jack Drummond, his foreman, a weathered man of 50 with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Nathan explained the situation briefly, watching Jack's expression shift from surprise to approval. "Heard Monroe wanted her," Jack said, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. "You done right, boss. Man like that got no business with any woman, let alone a sick one." The other 2 hands, brothers named Tom and Will Garrett, nodded agreement. "Need us to do anything?" Tom asked. "Just keep things running," Nathan said. "I will be staying close to the house for a few days." That night was the longest Nathan could remember in years. He dozed fitfully in a chair in the main room, waking every time he heard Maria moving around or Rebecca crying out in her delirium. Twice he went to the doorway of the spare room, watching as Maria sponged Rebecca's burning skin with cool water, changing her nightshirt when it became soaked with sweat. "Is she improving?" he asked near dawn when Maria emerged looking exhausted. "The fever is very high," Maria said honestly. "I have seen people die from less." But she is young and strong underneath the illness. We must wait and pray." Nathan was not a man who prayed often, but he found himself doing so anyway, sitting on the porch as the sun rose over his land, painting the desert in shades of gold and rose. He had built this ranch with his own hands, turned a patch of scrubland into something prosperous, but all of it seemed suddenly meaningless compared to the life of the woman burning up in his spare room. Rebecca's fever broke on the third day, so suddenly that Maria called out in relief, bringing Nathan running from where he had been working with the horses in the corral. He burst into the room to find Rebecca's eyes open, though confused and weak. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice like sandpaper. "You are safe," Nathan said, staying in the doorway, not wanting to frighten her. "You are at my ranch. You were very ill." Rebecca's gray eyes fixed on him, struggling to focus. "I remember the auction. You were there." "I was," Nathan admitted. "You fainted. I brought you here to recover." "You bought me," she said, and there was no accusation in her tone, only weary acceptance. "I bought your contract," Nathan corrected gently. "But you are not a slave, Miss Taylor. You are a guest here until you are well enough to decide your own path." Tears suddenly filled her eyes, spilling down her pale cheeks. "I have no path. I have nothing." Maria shooed Nathan out then, but he heard her gentle voice comforting Rebecca, speaking in a mixture of English and Spanish that somehow conveyed more warmth than words alone could carry. Over the next week, Rebecca slowly regained her strength. Maria fed her beef broth and soft bread, building her back up from the fragile skeleton she had become. Nathan kept his distance, only seeing her in passing when he came in for meals, though he was constantly aware of her presence in his house. He heard her soft voice thanking Maria, heard her slow footsteps as she began to move around her room, heard the creak of the rocking chair on the porch when Maria finally convinced her to take some air. It was 10 days after the auction when Nathan finally had a real conversation with her. He came in from a long day of fence repair to find Rebecca sitting at the kitchen table, wearing one of Maria's dresses that had been taken in to fit her smaller frame. Her hair was pulled back in a neat braid, and though she was still too thin and pale, the fever flush was gone, replaced by natural color returning slowly to her cheeks. "Good evening," she said quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "Miss Taylor," Nathan nodded, suddenly feeling awkward in his own home. "I am glad to see you up." "I wanted to thank you," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "Maria told me what you did, why you bid for my contract. You saved my life." Nathan shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Any decent man would have done the same." "That has not been my experience," Rebecca said with a trace of bitterness. "Decent men are rarer than gold, Mr. Vance." He sat down across from her, studying her properly for the first time. She had a fine-boned face with high cheekbones and a determined chin. Her gray eyes held intelligence and sadness in equal measure. "What brought you to Texas?" he asked, Rebecca's fingers twisted together. "Desperation," she said simply. "My father was a professor in Boston. When he died, he left debts I could not pay. The indentured contract was the only way to escape debtor's prison. I was promised work as a governess or teacher in Texas." She laughed bitterly. "Instead, I found myself on an auction block like chattel." Anger flared in Nathan's chest. "The man who arranged your passage lied to you." "I am learning that many people lie when it suits them," Rebecca said. "But not you, apparently. Maria says you told her I could leave whenever I wished." Nathan nodded. "I have no interest in keeping anyone against their will." "Where would I go?" Rebecca asked quietly. "I have no money, no prospects, and I am still weak. The fever took more out of me than I care to admit." "Then stay," Nathan heard himself say. "Stay and work if you wish to honor your contract." Maria could use help in the house, and when school starts in the fall, Shafter will need a teacher. The last one married a rancher from Marfa and moved away. Rebecca looked up, surprise and hope warring in her expression. "You would let me teach, if that is what you want," Nathan said. "Your contract says you owe 3 years of labor. I figure teaching school would count, and Maria would appreciate another woman around the place. She gets lonely out here with just us rough men." "Why are you being kind to me?" Rebecca asked suddenly, searching his face. "What do you want from me?" Nathan held her gaze steadily. "Nothing you do not wish to give. I bought your contract to keep you from Monroe, nothing more. What happens next is your choice." He saw the moment she decided to trust him, saw the tension ease from her shoulders. "Then I would like to stay if you are certain." "I will earn my keep, Mr. Vance. I'm not afraid of work." "Nathan," he corrected. "If you are going to be living here, we might as well use first names. Formality gets tiresome." "Nathan," she repeated, and the sound of his name in her voice did something strange to his chest. "Then you must call me Rebecca." "Rebecca," he agreed, and smiled for the first time since bringing her home. Over the following weeks, Rebecca grew stronger. She began helping Maria with cooking and mending, proving herself surprisingly capable despite her educated background. She knew how to make soap and preserve food, how to clean and organize, and she attacked every task with determination that spoke of pride and stubbornness in equal measure. Nathan found himself watching her more than was probably appropriate. He noticed how the sun brought out red highlights in her hair, how she bit her lower lip when concentrating on a difficult task, how she laughed at Maria's jokes with genuine warmth. She was beautiful, he realized, not in a flashy way but in a quiet manner that grew on a person. He also noticed how she flinched when any of the ranch hands raised their voices, how she kept her back to walls in rooms, how she startled easily at sudden sounds. Whatever had happened to her before reaching Texas had left marks deeper than the fever. One evening in late August, Nathan found her sitting on the porch watching the sunset, a book open but unread in her lap. He had just come from washing up at the pump, his hair still damp. "May I join you?" he asked. Rebecca nodded, shifting her skirts to make room on the bench. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sky turn from gold to orange to deep purple. "I have been thinking," Rebecca said finally, "about the teaching position. School starts in 2 weeks. Have you spoken to the town council?" "I have," Nathan confirmed. "They are eager to meet you. The children have been without proper schooling since April." Rebecca nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her book. "I am nervous," she admitted. "What if I am not good enough?" "You were raised by a professor," Nathan pointed out. "You have education most people in Shafter could only dream of. You will be more than good enough." She smiled at him then, a real smile that lit up her face. "Thank you for believing in me." Nathan felt his heart do that strange flip again. "You make it easy." The words hung between them, heavier than he had intended. Rebecca's cheeks flushed pink, and she looked away, but not before he saw something warm flicker in her eyes. "I should help Maria with supper," she said, standing quickly. But as she passed him, her hand briefly touched his shoulder, a gesture so light and quick he might have imagined it, except for the warmth that remained after she had gone. Nathan sat on the porch as darkness fell, his mind racing. He had not felt this way since before the war, since before he had learned that caring for people meant opening yourself up to loss. But Rebecca was different. She was strong and stubborn and brave in ways she probably did not even recognize. And she was living in his house, eating at his table, slowly becoming part of his life in ways he had not planned but found he did not want to change. The next day, he rode into Shafter to meet with the school board. They agreed immediately to hire Rebecca, pleased to have someone with her credentials. The salary was modest, but it came with a small cabin behind the schoolhouse that teachers traditionally used. When Nathan returned and told Rebecca the news, her joy was so transparent it made him ache. "My own home," she breathed. "I never thought I would have that again." "It is not much," Nathan warned. "Just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it is clean and dry." "It sounds perfect," Rebecca said, but then her expression clouded. "Although I will miss Maria and this place." "You will only be 15 miles away," Nathan pointed out, ignoring the tightness in his chest at the thought of her leaving. "You can visit on Sundays if you wish. Maria would like that." "Would you like that?" Rebecca asked quietly. Nathan met her eyes. "Yes," he said simply. "I would." The 2 weeks before school started passed too quickly. Nathan found himself inventing excuses to be near the house, to spend time in Rebecca's company. They talked about everything and nothing, discovering shared opinions on books and politics, laughing over Maria's stories about her children, debating the future of Texas with the intensity of people who cared deeply about such things. Nathan learned that Rebecca loved thunderstorms and hated coffee, that she could ride a horse but preferred walking, that she had a gift for mathematics that her father had encouraged despite social conventions. Rebecca learned that Nathan had a brother buried on the ranch, that he had nightmares about the war sometimes, that he could play the harmonica but was too shy to do it in front of people. "Play for me," Rebecca urged one evening when Maria had mentioned it. "I am not very good," Nathan protested. "I do not care," Rebecca said. "Please." So Nathan had retrieved the battered instrument from his room and played the songs his mother had taught him as a boy, simple melodies that spoke of home and longing. When he finished, Rebecca had tears in her eyes. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "Your mother must have been a wonderful woman." "She was," Nathan agreed. "She would have liked you." The words were out before he could stop them, too revealing, too honest, but Rebecca did not pull away. Instead, she reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand, her fingers small and warm in his. "I think I would have liked her too," she said. They sat like that as the stars came out, hand in hand, neither willing to break the connection. Nathan felt something shift in his chest, something that felt like the last wall crumbling. He was falling in love with Rebecca Taylor, and the realization was both terrifying and inevitable. The night before she was to move into the teacher's cabin, Maria retired early, leaving Nathan and Rebecca alone in the kitchen. They were packing a basket of supplies for her new home, working side by side in the lamplight. "I am going to miss this," Rebecca said quietly, carefully wrapping a jar of Maria's preserves. "Packing?" Nathan asked, knowing that was not what she meant, "being here." "With you," Rebecca clarified, not looking up. "These past weeks have been the happiest I can remember in a long time." Nathan set down the flour sack he was holding. "Rebecca, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, and he saw his own feelings reflected there, mixed with uncertainty and fear. "I need to tell you something," Nathan said. "And if I am wrong about this, I apologize in advance, but I cannot let you go tomorrow without saying it." "What?" Rebecca whispered. "I am in love with you," Nathan said simply. "I think I have been since the moment I caught you falling at that auction. I know the timing is terrible, and I know you have been through hell and probably need time, but I could not let you leave without knowing." Rebecca stared at him, her eyes wide. For a moment Nathan thought he had made a terrible mistake, and then she was in his arms, having crossed the distance between them in 2 quick steps. She was crying and laughing at the same time, her face buried in his chest. "I thought I was imagining it," she said, her voice muffled. "I thought it was just gratitude or loneliness or wishful thinking." Nathan tilted her face up gently. "And now I know I love you too," Rebecca said. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you play the harmonica when you think no one can hear. I love that you saved me when you could have walked away. I love you, Nathan Vance." He kissed her then, and it was like coming home after a long journey. Rebecca melted against him, her arms winding around his neck, and Nathan thought he could stay in this moment forever. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rebecca laughed shakily. "What do we do now?" "I think," Nathan said carefully, "we take things slow. You move into town, start teaching like you planned. I will court you properly, the way you deserve. And when you are ready, when you are sure, maybe we talk about making this permanent." "Courting," Rebecca repeated, smiling. "I have never been courted before." "Then I will have to make it memorable," Nathan promised, and he did. Over the next 3 months, as Rebecca settled into teaching and Nathan continued running his ranch, he courted her with a dedication that became the talk of Shafter. He brought her flowers he picked himself from the hills, rode into town every Sunday to escort her to church, and left small gifts on her doorstep. A book he thought she would enjoy, a new slate for her schoolroom, a warm shawl Maria had made. The town initially gossiped about Nathan Vance and his purchased woman, but they quickly learned to love Rebecca. She was a gifted teacher, patient with the slower students and challenging for the quick ones. She organized a library in the schoolhouse, taught evening classes for adults who wanted to learn reading, and became friends with many of the women in town. Nathan loved watching her become part of the community, loved seeing her confidence grow as she realized she had worth beyond what any contract said. But he loved their Sundays together most of all, when she would ride out to the ranch and spend the day helping Maria, talking with Nathan, simply being part of his life. On one such Sunday in November, with winter approaching and the air turning crisp, Nathan took Rebecca on a long ride to show her the full extent of his land. They rode for hours, talking and laughing, until they reached a spot high in the hills where the whole valley spread out below them. "It is beautiful," Rebecca breathed, taking in the view. "It is yours if you want it," Nathan said quietly. Rebecca turned to him, confused. "What?" Nathan dismounted and helped her down, then took both her hands in his. "I was going to wait until Christmas, make it romantic and perfect, but I cannot wait anymore. Rebecca Taylor, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Will you marry me?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Nathan, I am still under contract. Legally, I am still obligated to you for 2 more years." "I burned your contract 3 months ago," Nathan admitted. "The day after you moved to town. You have been free this whole time, Rebecca. You stayed because you wanted to, and you can leave the same way, but I am asking you to stay forever." "You burned it," Rebecca whispered. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because I wanted you to fall in love with me, not feel obligated to me," Nathan said. "I wanted every choice you made to be free, so I am asking now, with no contract between us, no debt, no obligation. Just 2 people who love each other. Will you marry me?" Rebecca threw her arms around him, nearly knocking them both over. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes." Nathan kissed her thoroughly, and when they finally broke apart, both grinning like fools, he pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band with a single small diamond. "It was my grandmother's," he explained, sliding it onto her finger. "The only valuable thing my family brought from Virginia. My mother wore it, and now I want you to have it." Rebecca stared at the ring through her tears, then at Nathan. "I do not deserve you." "We deserve each other," Nathan corrected. "We have both been through enough. We deserve this happiness." They were married in early December in the small church in Shafter, with half the town in attendance. Maria cried through the entire ceremony, and Jack Drummond stood as Nathan's best man. Rebecca wore a dress that the women of Shafter had pooled their resources to make, a beautiful creation of cream silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Rebecca with all the love and promise he could convey, and the church erupted in cheers. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside despite the cold, and people brought food and drink and music. Nathan danced with his bride under the stars, holding her close, marveling at how his life had changed in just 6 months. "Are you happy?" he murmured against her hair. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Rebecca replied. "When I stood on that auction block, I thought my life was over. Now I feel like it is just beginning." "It is," Nathan promised. "This is just the start." Rebecca moved into the ranch house, and Nathan quickly learned that marriage to an educated, opinionated woman was never boring. They debated everything from politics to poetry, challenged each other constantly, and loved each other with an intensity that surprised them both. Rebecca continued teaching, riding into Shafter 3 times a week while Maria stayed at the ranch, having decided she preferred the quiet of country life to any other option. Winter passed into spring, and spring into summer. Rebecca's contract officially expired in July, 1 year after Nathan had bought it, and they celebrated by having a picnic at the spot where he had proposed. Nathan gave her a new contract he had drawn up himself, filled with ridiculous clauses about love and honor and promising to appreciate her cooking even when she tried new recipes that did not quite work out. Rebecca laughed until she cried, then kissed him senseless. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me," she said when they finally came up for air. "The feeling is mutual, Mrs. Vance," Nathan replied. In October, Rebecca came to Nathan with news that made his heart stop and then race. She was pregnant. They were going to have a baby. Nathan swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to stop. "Are you happy?" she asked, touching his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Nathan said. "Terrified, excited, amazed, grateful, but yes, incredibly happy." The pregnancy was not easy. Rebecca suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well into her 4th month, and Nathan learned to make ginger tea and hold her hair back when she was ill. But as her belly grew round with their child, she seemed to glow from within, becoming even more beautiful than before. She stopped teaching in March when travel became too difficult, and the town threw her a party, the women bringing tiny clothes and blankets, the men promising Nathan he would never sleep again. On a warm night in May 1880, Rebecca went into labor. Nathan sent Tom riding for the doctor in Marfa while Maria took charge, turning the bedroom into a delivery room. Nathan paced outside, driven half mad by Rebecca's cries, until Maria finally let him in to hold his wife's hand. "I am here," he told Rebecca, letting her squeeze his hand until he thought the bones might break. "I am right here, love. You can do this." "Easy for you to say," Rebecca panted, then cried out as another contraction hit. The labor lasted 12 hours, from midnight until noon the next day, and Nathan thought he might die from fear and helplessness. But finally, he heard a new sound, the sharp, angry cry of a newborn. "A boy," Maria announced, holding up a red, squalling infant. "You have a son." Nathan looked down at Rebecca, who was exhausted but smiling, tears streaming down her face. "We have a son," he repeated, awed. They named him Thomas, after Nathan's brother who was buried on the ranch, and Catherine for Rebecca's mother. Tom Vance was a healthy, loud baby who demanded attention, and gave it back in equal measure. Nathan fell completely in love the first time he held his son, feeling the tiny weight in his arms and understanding suddenly why people talked about the meaning of life. Rebecca recovered slowly from the birth, and Nathan learned to change diapers and walk the floor at night, rocking Tom when he fussed, singing the old songs his mother had taught him. Maria doted on the baby, and even the ranch hands softened, taking turns holding him and making ridiculous faces to elicit smiles. "We made a person," Rebecca said one night, watching Nathan rock Tom to sleep. "How did we make something so perfect?" "We had good raw materials to work with," Nathan teased, then sobered. "He is perfect because he is ours, Rebecca, because he is made of our love." Life settled into a new rhythm. Rebecca eventually returned to teaching part-time, bringing Tom with her when he was small, then leaving him with Maria as he grew more active. Nathan expanded the ranch, buying more land and cattle, building something solid for his family. Tom was joined 2 years later by a sister they named Alice, a quiet, thoughtful baby who studied the world with solemn gray eyes like her mother's. And 3 years after that came another boy, Samuel, who seemed determined from birth to keep up with his older brother. The ranch house grew louder and more chaotic, filled with children's laughter and tears, with toys scattered across floors and small muddy footprints on the porch. Nathan built additions to accommodate their growing family, and Rebecca hung curtains and planted a garden, making the house truly a home. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep and the ranch was settled for the night, Nathan and Rebecca would sit on the porch where they had first held hands all those years ago. Sometimes they talked, sharing their days and dreams. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, connected by years of love and partnership. "You ever think about that day?" Rebecca asked one such evening. "The auction?" "Sometimes," Nathan admitted. "I think about how close I came to walking past, to minding my own business." "I would have ended up with Monroe," Rebecca said quietly, "or someone like him. My life would have been very different." "Shorter," Nathan said grimly. "Men like Monroe do not take care of the women in their keeping." Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder. "Instead, I got you. A man who saved me without asking for anything in return, who gave me freedom and love and this beautiful life." "I got the better deal," Nathan argued. "You gave me everything I did not know I needed." "We saved each other," Rebecca decided. "That is how I prefer to think of it." "Then that is how it was," Nathan agreed, kissing the top of her head. As the years passed, Nathan and Rebecca grew old together. Tom took over the ranch, proving to be a skilled cattleman with his father's integrity and his mother's intelligence. Alice became a doctor, traveling to study in the East before returning to Shafter to serve her community. Samuel became a lawyer, fighting for justice in the courts with passionate dedication. All 3 children married and had families of their own, filling the ranch with grandchildren who ran and played where their parents had before them. Nathan built a separate house for himself and Rebecca, a smaller place on a hill overlooking the valley where they could have peace but still be near their family. On their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Tom stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who proved that love can bloom in the most unlikely circumstances and that true partnership makes all things possible. Happy anniversary." "Hear, hear." Everyone chorused, and Nathan looked at Rebecca, seeing the young woman from the auction block in her smile, the determination that had pulled her through fever and hardship still evident in her eyes. "I love you," he told her, as he had told her countless times over 30 years. "I love you too," Rebecca replied, as she always did. "Best purchase you ever made." It was an old joke between them, but Nathan shook his head. "No purchase. You were never mine to buy, but choosing to love you to build this life together, best decision I ever made." Rebecca's eyes filled with happy tears. "Mine too." They lived to see their grandchildren grown, to rock great-grandchildren on the same porch where they had first confessed their love. The ranch prospered across generations, and Shafter grew from a rough mining town into a real community, with Rebecca's influence felt in the school that bore her name and the library she had founded. When Nathan died peacefully in his sleep at 78, Rebecca held his hand, whispering all the things she had always told him, that he was her hero, her partner, the love of her life. Tom found them in the morning, his father gone and his mother still holding his hand, tears on her face but peace in her expression. "He was the best man I ever knew," Tom said softly. "He was," Rebecca agreed, "and he was mine." Rebecca lived another 5 years, spending her time with her family, writing her memoirs about coming west and finding love in unlikely places. She corresponded with women across the country who were fighting for rights and education, supporting causes she believed in until the very end. When she died, also peacefully, also surrounded by family, they buried her next to Nathan on the hill where he had proposed. The whole town came to the funeral, 3 generations of former students among them, all testifying to the impact Rebecca Vance had made on their lives. Tom stood at his parents' grave after everyone had left, his own children and grandchildren with him. "They had an amazing love story," his oldest granddaughter said. "They did," Tom agreed. Started with Papa saving grandmother from an auction block, and ended 70 years later with a family and legacy that changed this whole territory. That is what love can do when it is real and strong. He placed flowers on both graves, white roses that Rebecca had always loved. "Rest together," he said softly. "You earned it." The sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and the Vance family walked back down the hill together, carrying forward the legacy of love and determination that Nathan and Rebecca had built. The ranch would continue, generation after generation, but the story would remain, of a rancher who saw a woman in need and chose compassion over convenience, and of a woman who transformed catastrophe into triumph through strength and grace. Their love story became legend in Shafter, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a simple choice to do the right thing, to help someone in need, to see beyond circumstances to the person beneath. Nathan and Rebecca Vance had shown an entire community what true partnership looked like, and their influence rippled outward through time, touching lives far beyond what either of them could have imagined that hot July day in 1878. The ranch stood as testimony to their love, the land they had built together still thriving, still held by their descendants, still a place where love and hard work mattered more than anything else. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew through the hills, people swore they could hear harmonica music drifting from the old house on the hill, a reminder that some loves are too strong to be contained by something as simple as death. Nathan and Rebecca Vance had found each other against all odds, had built something beautiful from desperate circumstances, and had loved each other completely for every day they had together. It was, by any measure, a life well lived and a love story for the ages. The auction block that had brought them together was long gone, torn down and forgotten, but what had grown from that moment of compassion and connection remained, vital and alive, proving that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we choose to care, to act, to love without reservation or guarantee. Their story ended not with sadness but with fulfillment, with generations of family carrying forward their values, with a community forever changed by their presence, and with 2 souls who had found in each other everything they had ever needed. In the wild, hard country of West Texas, where life was uncertain and survival was never guaranteed, Nathan and Rebecca Vance had created something rare and precious, a love that lasted, a partnership that strengthened them both, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. That was their victory, their triumph, and their gift to all who came after. And in the end, it was more than enough. It was everything.